Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon and evening, wherever you might be. I'm going to be joined shortly with Earl Bloodworth and another gentleman, and we are going to be discussing a social innovation initiative that is an opportunity. Just as a point of full disclosure, I've worked for Empowered New Haven Urban League, and in my corporate life had a chance to be involved with a number of what we would call then affirmative action initiatives, but which are now diversity and inclusion. But we're going to be joined today by Michael. Good afternoon. How you doing?
Good. Hi. How are you?
Good. And we're just waiting for Earl to join us, and then we'll kind of spend maybe 30 minutes. And I'm really hopefully you've been enjoying this Sunday. I'm just making some opening remarks. I do a radio show on Mondays at 11, and was giving a little promo about that.
Okay.
Did you go to church today?
No, I don't. I'm Muslim. I don't attend church.
Okay, all right. And I didn't make it either, so I'm not sure if I'm Muslim or Christian, or I haven't self-identified yet.
Okay.
I'm sure there's some labels that pertain. I was looking at your website a little earlier, and are you still working with? Is your organization still working with All Our Kin?
Yes. Yes, very much so.
Clifford Beers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm reasonably familiar with both of those organizations, and
yeah, I was on the board of Clifford Beers for many years, and when I first started working in New Haven, I met Jenna Wagner. She was one of the first people I met back in 2007, I think it was.
Yes,
when All Our Kin was a much smaller organization than it is now.
Speaking of Jonna, I met Jonna's mother even when Jonna was a student at Wilbur Cross High School. So
okay,
it's a small world. I was
it's a small town.
Involved with the at that time it was called the Private Industry Council. Now it's Workforce Development Board. And
yes,
Jonna's mother, as you know, worked there for a number of years. Are you good for like 20 minutes or so? 20, 25
minutes? I'm completely at your disposal.
Okay, and I'm assuming Earl. I know we've had communications yesterday and the day before, so I'm expecting him to kind of pop in shortly.
All right, I'll go on mute, and you can continue your promo if you like, or we can continue to talk. If that,
let's continue to talk. Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Where do you live now?
So right now, I normally live in New Haven, but I was leasing an apartment there. I owned a home there and lived there for many years when I raised my kids there. But then Earl just sent me a message saying he's trying to log on now. But once COVID happened, I got out of my lease in midsummer, and I'm here in actually Shutesbury, Massachusetts. Earl says he's having connectivity issues.
We froze up for a second.
Oh, sorry. I said Earl just said that he's having connectivity issues.
Yes.
But I'm just going to tell him okay. And so I'm right now at our home in Shutesbury, Massachusetts, which is about 10 miles north of Amherst, Massachusetts.
All right. The Battle of people forget about the Battle of Amherst. In terms of our colonial history and Native American history, it's really, and Lord Amherst for that matter. So,
yep, and there's the main road through here is the Daniel Shays Highway.
Yes,
which is Shays Rebellion, which happened over in Sheffield, but on the Sheffield Plain. But yeah, there's a vicious time back then. A lot of vicious fights.
It was vicious, and I referenced Shays Rebellion when I chat with people. I mean, it's a vicious time in terms of just the Adams and Lincoln, Adams and Jefferson election. People just forget how vicious that was. But let's jump in. And when Earl, because this technology world, I mean, I've been freezing up with a lot of my calls. So tell us about the organization. And Earl had mentioned that there's an opportunity for other people to kind of, for you to ally with and be involved with, and even find some resources.
Yes. So just starting with Social Venture Partners Connecticut. It's one of 43 affiliates associated with a parent organization called Social Venture Partners International. Originally, it started as several dozen folks from Fairfield County who pulled some funds together to help support several nonprofits in Fairfield County. Then in about 2016, they shifted, and this started, grew to, I believe, 45 or 50 partners by then. And they eventually partnered with a number of other nonprofits, all in what is described as the cradle to career space.
Okay.
Cradle to career space starts with early childhood education and early childhood, like mental health and health issues, to K-8 education, grades 9 through 12, and career readiness, and workforce development, and then economic development. And what they found over those 4 years, as they not only in partnering with these organizations, they also provided sort of like advisory or support services, support technical services, and in sort of a consulting mode to some degree, to help organizations figure out what their strategic plans were, help them advance their agendas, revise or change their HR practices or their financial practices or their database, stuff like that.
Sure.
And then it became apparent with the work with the Governor's Workforce Council, which is basically led by Garrett Moran, who founded Year Up. He's on the board of Social Venture Partners Connecticut, and they've done an extensive amount of work over the past year to revamp the workforce development space in the state of Connecticut to address many of the unaddressed needs of underserved populations to gain access to the opportunities afforded by them.
Great.
So, and a relook at some of the institutions and the results that they're getting or not getting, haven't been getting historically. And so one of the other things in 2016, 2017, it became apparent that in being engaged in this work required acknowledging the racial disparities in both opportunities and outcomes that exist in our state. And our state, especially with respect to education, has some of the worst disparities in the country.
Yes.
And if you don't acknowledge that, then you're not acknowledging the problem. You're not going to solve the problem.
So tell people why we are here this afternoon and how they can get involved and
sure. So we are here today to talk about one of the initiatives that Social Venture Partners has taken on that I've been spearheading over the last 6 months, and it's what's called a participatory grant making pilot. And what we did is, from among the Social Venture partners, we've raised about $200,000, which we will then ultimately fund, and I'll describe how we will fund.
Yes.
We'll fund grassroots organizations and nonprofits that are run by African Americans for the benefit of underserved African American populations in Bridgeport and New Haven.
Boy, this is a real opportunity.
Oh, yes, yes. Each of the grants, there will only be 7 or 8 grants, each totaling $25,000 for general operating expenses. They will not be project-based. And oftentimes smaller nonprofits and minority-run nonprofits have a terrible time trying to get general operating funds to fund their mission as opposed to funding a project.
Is your website up currently in terms of people finding application information, et cetera?
Yes, I will be able to provide you with that information. I'll just have to look and reference it because it just went up today.
Okay, great.
Now the difference here is that the social venture partners, the partners like I was one before I joined the staff, we're not actually making the decision as to who is going to fund.
I can't bribe you then. It would be wasted.
No, I have no say. Earl Bloodworth, who's on the show now, and 6 other individuals like him, African American and Latino, who are professionals in various spaces. Earl works in the reentry space, but there are people there's a person from philanthropy, there's a person from housing, there's a person from what would you call it? I can't remember exactly how to describe each of the spaces that they're from, but it's from a diversity of spaces in the nonprofit sector, and they are the decision makers.
Mm-hmm.
And I am here to promote this opportunity and here to support them in whatever decision they make, and make sure that all of the logistics and all of the, the paperwork and
Sure.
all that stuff gets done.
What are you looking for from the standpoint of a viable organization for a mission that kind of aligns with your objectives? How are you going to kind of decide on the criteria and who are the most?
Yeah, that's kind of what we've been working on, right?
Yes, exactly. And if you would bear with me for one moment, I can actually tell you exactly what the criteria are.
Okay.
I apologize for the delay.
I mean, this really sounds exciting. And as you're looking, I know you can chew gum and
Sure.
hopscotch and boogaloo and do the
Sure.
twist and do whatever, and salsa, whatever your predilection might be. You mentioned the 25,000 for operating expenses. Is that just a one-time situation, or is it renewable?
For right now, it's one time, because this is our pilot program, and we have we first have to see how all this works, because I do not believe that at least in Connecticut, what we were doing has actually been tried before.
Great.
To this degree.
Mm-hmm.
There have been some attempts, and there have been some really successful programs in other organizations in other states. And we talked with them to figure out how to structure this. But to give you an idea, so our fund objective is to provide unrestricted funds to grassroots community-based organizations addressing systemic or root causes of racially inequitable outcomes. So we are not funding direct service organizations, unless that direct service organization also happens to be addressing systemic issues. So the example that I give is, two examples that I give are, we're not funding bail funds, but we would fund an organization that's working to change the bail system.
So repeat that again, because that's really a very fundamental delineation and distinction.
Yes, we are providing unrestricted funds to grassroots community-based organizations addressing systemic or root causes of racially inequitable outcomes. And we have an extensive explanation of what that is as an appendix to the grant application, where we provide examples of what constitutes systemic systems work.
So it's really going for the root and not to the symptoms.
Exactly. So we're not trying to fund a food pantry. We're trying to fund an organization that's trying to change the system so we won't need food pantries.
Right.
And where are we, gentlemen, in terms of the deadline for people to apply?
So the application deadline will be January 15th. So people have more than a month to respond.
Right.
I will also add that while sometimes you write a grant and you just write it and you submit it and that's it, here on the application, we've listed two individuals, myself and another SVP partner, Kipling Smith, who you can, any applicant can contact us via email if they have any questions, if they just want to discuss the nuances in their organization and basically help walk them through the process.
Or that's rare, yeah.
Right, because it's incredibly important to us that people not only feel they have access to this, but that they actually have access. And sometimes access is inhibited by an ambiguity about what a question is asking, for instance.
Indeed.
And what your response will mean for the application. Right. And what we want to do is make sure it's a dialogue as we go through this process. And we're willing to spend the time to do it, because it's important that the right organizations who are doing the work end up applying and having access to these funds, depending on how things shake out.
And the date again, the deadline in January is when again?
January
15th.
January 15th. That's MLK month and then MLK weekend. And where are we looking in terms of the grant decisions being made? The
grant decisions would be made over the next month. And by mid-February, the fund.
So it's a really super quick turnaround.
Yeah.
That's what we're aiming for. definitely.
That's tremendous. Earl, glad you're able to get on. I was mentioning to Michael that, yeah, given the Zoom and just this technology, I even had some, I'm going to have to call Comcast today and tomorrow morning to make sure because I'm freezing up like crazy. Michael, you alluded to the fact that New Haven and Bridgeport kind of rose to the top in terms of the innovative two sites. How did that happen? I mean, is it because Earl's such a great guy, or you just have tremendous people in New Haven, or?
Well, it certainly helped that I'd known Earl for at least a decade, and
Please.
at least a decade, and that he had worked in both New Haven and Bridgeport extensively. So, but what really drove it was Social Venture Partners started in Fairfield County.
Okay.
And Bridgeport is the need, in terms of the need for services and assistance. Bridgeport was the neediest community, and then with respect to New Haven, because the next the next expansion, the next step of the expansion of Social Venture Partners has been into New Haven.
Indeed.
So we said, okay, let's do these two cities. Not that other cities are unworthy or something, because they
Indeed.
aren't. There's lots of need in lots of places, but we figured for this first go, we're going to go to two places where we have a pretty deep knowledge of the communities. And in particular, we have a deep knowledge of the people who are doing the work in the communities.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, because I knew people in New Haven, and I knew Earl. So I'm like, okay, I know somebody who I think could be a good person for this grant making committee. And we ended up with interviewing 28 candidates and selected 7, excuse me.
Boy, that's okay. Tremendous. So yeah, but really quick turnaround. Where, in terms of, people always ask, are the Koch brothers funding you, or is Gates funding you, or where's the money coming from?
All right, so the money is coming from Social Venture Partners. So the 200 people or so who are basically the partners that make Social Venture Partners what it is. We are the ones who are funding.
Individuals of means that really want to move us ahead in terms
exactly.
Of
and the Smart Family Foundation has also contributed some money to this as well. But by and large, it's Social Venture Partners as an operation and the partners, and that's it. There's no other external money at all.
That's fascinating. Are there equivalent organizations in the nation that you're aware of, or how do you kind of stack up or compare yourselves, or how do you perceive your niche?
So there are, in terms of Social Venture Partner affiliates, there are dozens in the United States. The most intriguing, I would say, of them is Social Venture Partners Portland, which after 8 years of convening various stakeholders, the nonprofit community, the community activists, government, et cetera, just passed a $130 million referendum to fund universal pre-K in Portland, Oregon. So they looked at the system of pre-K pre-K education there and said, there's a population here that's just not being served, and we need to change this system. So it took them 8 years, but that's what it takes to change systems. You've got to start somewhere. You just got to go. At Social Venture Partners Connecticut is probably the next in line, I believe. Don't hold me to this, but I believe in terms of the systems level work we're doing on a statewide basis with the Governor's Workforce Council and with early childhood education. And as far as the participatory grant making pilot, we're the only Social Venture Partners organization that's doing something like this to this extent.
That's fascinating. That's
yeah.
fascinating. And do you think you will always? Are you doing it from a demonstration standpoint? Do you want to be the only anomaly, or do you hope the other social venture satellites?
Oh, I would love to not be the anomaly. So this, to me, has always been a proof of concept, and that we are documenting everything.
Yes.
And we're going to basically write a document that says, like, okay, if you want to do this, here's what you do on Tuesday, here's what you do on Wednesday, here's what you do on Thursday, here's what you do on, like, it's not going to be a theoretical document about the virtues of participatory grant making. It's going to be here's how we did it. And then people and organizations can modify it or hybridize it based
Sure.
on whatever their needs and issues are.
So as you say, you can customize, but also you have a toolkit, a specific kind of
A toolkit or a
background.
template, exactly.
That's, and for the 20, that's for the next 12, once the grants are awarded for the, for 12 months?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And if someone wants to submit to you and they're, are you going to ask them, are they going to other foundations or grant making sources here in New Haven or in Bridgeport? Is there any competition there, or do you kind of package
No,
a proposal?
no, there's no competition. No, we're not. You know, we're not even asking that question in the grant proposal. Where you get your funding is where you get your funding.
Yeah, it's a fairly simple application. So, I mean, as far as application for grants go.
Mm-hmm. Earl, and so Michael's alluded to your kind of friendship with one another. What was kind of the impetus and the incentive for you to kind of, because I know you offline and you're reasonably busy. I mean, I might post 15,000 things on Facebook each day, and you'll share maybe another 12,000 of them, and not to mention your jobs and your commuting. What was the incentive in your fraternal work? What was the incentive for you to kind of be involved with this initiative?
I mean, prior to Michael telling me about this particular opportunity, we had been talking about SVP and some of the work they were doing, and just found it fairly interesting. I know there's been a huge turn for some really active, proactive philanthropy work from different foundations like the Graustein Foundation. And I like what was being said about giving people the power to, advocate for themselves and make systemic change as opposed to just tinkering around the edges. So, and it's a start. And if this proof of concept can be proven effective, then this is something that can be duplicated throughout this community and others. Michael mentioned the education gap in the state of Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
Out of the 50 states in the union, Connecticut, even though it's one of the wealthiest states in the union, has one, if not the largest, one of the largest. I think we rank like third in the education gap.
Right.
And Connecticut, for all of its vaunted progressiveness, it's a land of steady habits. And things move very, very slow here. And if you were to really drill down on the geographical map, Connecticut is not as progressive as we would like to believe. And a lot of the progressiveness comes from the major urban centers, out of Bridgeport, out of New Haven, out of Hartford, out of Waterbury, New London. So there are pockets of it. And that's why we have these great disparities. Like, Bridgeport is part of Fairfield, but it's one of the poorest cities in the country.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Michael, let's talk, and Earl, let's just continue on this theme, because I hear you're referencing this is really a tactical laser-like focus on making change. I mean, I've worked for the Urban League before. I've worked for something called Empire in New Haven. Been involved with the social space, and was also involved with jobs when we call things affirmative action. Now I guess they're called diversity and inclusion. So sometimes it's easy to be disenchanted with the prospects of really moving the needle in a positive fashion rather than just remaining stagnant or even kind of regressing. But Michael, so elaborate a little bit more again about when you say system change and systemic change, people are hearing that phrase so much. I think they are even not understanding that it's we don't have to say creating a revolution, but there's a need for us not to do things the same way we've done things before.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, so the two things. One is my late father people would call him the real Michael Van Leesten. Some people in New Haven know of him very well, knew him well. But he would always say, if you want things to change, you've got to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And if we keep doing what we've been doing, we're going to keep getting what we've been getting.
Yes.
There's no logical reason why that wouldn't be true. And so you don't want to keep doing the same thing again and again and again and hoping for a different result. There are a lot of things that we can do differently that are starting to be done differently. A lot of it, including simply a change in mindset and expectations and aspirations that we have. I've had conversations already with several organizations about the idea of systems change, and they're doing systems change, but they weren't thinking about it or characterizing it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very interesting because they were so used to just trying to get that project money
Yes.
from they're thinking of things in terms of projects, and instead of would anybody actually fund my mission?
Yes.
You actually believe in the mission. And what I'm hoping is that through this process, through other initiatives that I have going on at SVP, through what Social Venture Partners is doing, what other organizations are doing throughout the state, that we can start to change this conversation. If in my estimation, as someone who's new to the philanthropic space, I don't see, and so I can't claim to be an expert, but as someone who's reasonably observant and taking a look at it, I think to continue to do what we've been doing over the past 10, 20, 30, 40 years is not going to move the needle systemically for the majority of people whose needs we're trying to address and whose future we're trying to make more promising.
Indeed. And even on that note, just let's reprise a little bit about the distinction that you made and give us a few other examples of outcomes that you, rather than just program delivery services.
Sure. So and you'll see this in the appendix to the application on pages 5 through 7. Any applicant can, or anybody even looking at the application, can see these examples that I'm about to provide. But for instance, we talk about an organization that changes the way in which emergency response funds for residents of public housing are directed by giving the residents discretion over how the funds are spent, right? As opposed to, so it's about how something is done, not just what is done. There's a grassroots effort that changed the rules and regulations to increase the influence of HIV positive African American women in the funding and decision making about that funding statewide. In other words, they were left out of the process.
Yes.
Now they're included in the process, so you have better decision making, right? Another one is an organization that establishes practices to appeal to the humanity of those who commit or have the potential to commit gun violence in order to engage those individuals in services and support. These activities change how communities are policed by empowering residents with direct involvement in the policing process in a humane or restorative way, as opposed to let's just go arrest them and lock them up again, right?
Right.
And also it mitigates the potential violence by addressing disconnectedness that helps perpetuate socially negative behaviors in the first place. So it's thinking differently about that kid who could go in one direction, instead of just locking them up. Say, no. Let's, as a community, not just the police's responsibility. It's not just this person's responsibility, that organization's responsibility. It's we got to look at this holistically, because they're part of the community and they're part of our community. So that's those are. I can give several more if you have time.
Tease one more, because it's a not necessarily a subtle distinction. I mean, it's a monumental distinction. But as you say, people. It's a change of mindsets, change of tactics, and even being creative and innovative about how you see your purpose and passion and mission. So a few more would be helpful.
Okay, sure. So another one, a nonprofit successfully led its constituency in an effort to redirect funding to beneficiaries instead of channeling funds through intermediaries with restrictions on the use of the funds. Right? In other words, just because people don't have a lot of resources, assets, or income doesn't mean that they're incapable of making intelligent decisions about resources that come their way or funds that come their way, right? And this has been proven internationally, and it's starting finally to gain traction in the United States. That another one is an initiative that establishes and maintains working relationships and collaboration between artists and traditional nonprofits in order to facilitate more meaningful discussions, greater creativity and problem solving, and a better understanding of why current environment and systems exist. The work focuses on optimizing communication by, quote, speaking the same language, quote, of the people being served. And I don't just mean Spanish.
Indeed.
Portuguese or
Indeed.
Vietnamese. I mean, speaking to people where they recognize that you recognize the truth of the problem. When speaking the language means speaking in a way that is both empathetic and truly understanding of what the issues are.
Or that has people will throw around the term cultural competency, but
yes,
but certainly you have to resonate and have a basis of understanding.
Perfect term.
I think also that to add to that, it's what Michael was talking about with the, doing the same thing that we've done for the last 30, 40 years. It's been a lot of what I like to call, I guess, saviorism. People coming into communities and saying, I know what the problem is from top down. I'm the savior, as opposed to providing people who have very little access to capital so they can actually solve their problems, because the people that are closest to the problem are going to be closest to the solution.
Mm-hmm.
Systemic change, as we know, it's not going to be anything that's going to be easy. When you're talking about changing systems of government, systems in corporations, you're talking about our systems in politics, because you're talking about having to enact multiple fronts of pressure internally and externally. So you want structural change, relational change. You also want transformative change. So that takes a lot of work, and the people that are closest to the issue are going to be the best people to help resolve it.
Excellent. You gentlemen, do you have another, say, 5 or 6 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes?
Much as you need.
Well, we just got to know one another, Mike. But I've been called a number of things, but I can consume. I'm an addict when it comes to content service delivery. But I won't harass you too much. Talk about fiduciaries, and if I have an organization, how long do I have to be in existence? What are some of the criteria there? And if I even need to, if I have an individual idea, can I link up with someone else and then write a proposal and submit it to you?
Sure, all of those things. Yes. Okay. So because of we're a 501c3, so because of our 501c3 status, we have to be able to donate to either an organization that has a 501c3 or an organization that has a fiscal agent that is a 501c3. Mm-hmm. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is we really don't address how long an organization has been in place. What helps is if the organization has some results to speak of, or if it's a new organization that the people running or initiative that the people running the organization or initiative have a track record or history that they can point to in terms of the work, because we need some indication.
Indeed, yes, indeed. And the point that you mentioned, and Earl, I have a specific question for you, and it pertains to certain colors, some purple and gold colors that you like. I'll explain that in a second. And Michael, I'm not sure. Do you wear purple and gold? Do you wear crimson and green? Okay. Earl, I'm going to come to you in a minute. Let's do a little sidebar, if we could, Michael, and give a little homage to you referenced your father, and if you're comfortable in mentioning that, I do radio shows and blogging, et cetera, but I think I love to take the opportunity to kind of acknowledge our ancestors, either it's direct or indirect. So you referenced your father. People and you said that people might know him. You're a junior, I presume.
Different middle name, but yeah, technically a junior.
So what was his claim to fame from your kind of standpoint?
So my father was an unusually charismatic guy. He was a very good athlete. He went to the Air Force after high school. He came back while he was in the Air Force in I think 1960, 61. White guy, actually, a friend that he made there started telling him about what was going on with the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. Which, when you're 19 years old in France, it's not like they had the internet back then, right? And he got him this book. He brought him this book called The Negro Revolt by Lionel Lomax. And it was a history of civil rights from 1620 to 1960. And in that book, the epigraph of that book was from the fellow who wrote Les Miserables. He said, who wrote that. He said, greater than the tread of a mighty army is an idea whose time has come.
Hmm.
My dad sort of took that to heart. He came back and he recognized, that there was he lived on the east side of Providence, and there were a bunch of small manufacturers there, light manufacturing, and there was a screw factory. And one day he brought one of his relatives down there and said, "We're going to get you a job."
Hmm.
And they turned him down. They were not giving Black people manufacturing jobs in Rhode Island in the early 60s. You just couldn't get a job to support yourself. And that really stuck in my dad's craw. And my grandmother had been a maid for a wealthy family in Barrington, Rhode Island at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that stuck with him. And he basically, long story short, got connected with the Reverend Leon Sullivan.
Yes.
Opportunities Industrialization
Yes.
Center.
Oh, I see. Sure.
And from a small storefront on Camp Street, where he took out a home equity loan to buy some IBM typewriters to train 30 women to be secretaries. And that grew into a multi-million-dollar facility that's now part of the Community College of Rhode Island Providence campus.
Mm-hmm.
But he built this big organization, and I grew up around that and around him.
Yes.
And the one thing he kept saying, and I quote him a lot because he was right, he said, "Without a vision, people will fail."
Mm-hmm.
You got to have a vision. You got to be thinking about the far horizon, not about the next. It's not about the next battle. It's about the war.
Yes.
Right. And it's a long one. And he didn't live to see the end of it. And neither will we. And that's okay. But get to it.
Yes, that's
Get
right.
to it.
That's right.
That's all. That's our job,
Right.
just to get to it. So
That's right.
that was my dad. I mean, he was a great dad too, and he's a ridiculously good dad. But that's a whole nother story. We could have a conversation about fatherhood or something. And
actually, my next my show next Monday, not tomorrow. It's on. There's a Fight the Flu New Haven campaign here in New Haven, just to inform and educate folks about the importance of particularly getting your flu shot now, given the global war that's going on. But the following Monday, I'm going to talk to Anthony Judkins and Michael Ferguson from Waterbury. Anthony's with usually with Earl DHS. Anyway, the Fatherhood Initiative through the state. So the focus next week will be on the Fatherhood Initiative with Reverend Odinga Perry and others. Earl, my question for you is, and Michael, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm known to do it. Can fraternities apply for this?
I would suppose they can, provided that they have either, like Michael said, a fiduciary fiscal partner, or they are in fact themselves a 501, I forget how.
501c3.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me that our social and civic organizations, really, nothing against them. I go to all the various events and support the various events, but I think we still can take a deeper dive about our original, the original mission of the Kappas and the Qs and the Alphas and the Boule, et cetera. I think we can still take a deeper dive. As we kind of conclude, it seems to me, Michael, and I want you to maybe kind of reflect on this, given COVID in this virtual world and just community organizing, having a job, making money, the whole world is changing about how we're going to exchange value and purpose and passion and food, and just the whole distribution method of just how we're going to live is really going to, it's difficult for me to even predict how we're going to come out of this tunnel. But that also is going to require when people apply for this grant, to really be innovative and thoughtful about how they can be tactical given the plague that's currently underway. We're going to have additional plagues in the future. This is a chance to really for you to make your decisions on which applicants are seem to be most feasible. That's going to be a tough thing as well. So just I'm talking out of maybe 5 sides of my mouth, but it's an opportunity like crazy. But it's also understanding that we're in such crazy times that we've never confronted before. And so, if I'm making any sense,
can I just throw? Let me throw this idea out at you. When I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, I never once heard my older relatives talk about the Depression the way you saw it in the press, right? Because nothing changed. But African Americans have always been far more resilient.
Yes.
Than we've even given ourselves credit for. And I am absolutely confident that the process that we're going through and our willingness to engage with individual applicants to make sure that they can put their best ideas forward and propose this stuff. I absolutely believe that we'll end up getting better ideas out of people, and they'll be able to then have more capability to implement them.
Indeed.
I really do. Like, in terms of selecting them, yeah, I hope it's so many that I don't know what to do with myself. That would be, but if it is, then that's not the end of the story. It's not like, it's, we're going to take this one step at a time. I'm not going to get in over my skis, so to speak, and get too crazy all of a sudden, because again, this is a pilot program, but I don't have any doubt at all. There are very few things that I'm 100% sure of, but I'm 100% sure that African Americans, people in our communities, can actually, with the resources, solve the problems that are addressing our communities, because we know all of the dynamics involved. So that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, I think out of the struggle and out of the challenge that we face, our people have always proven to be very innovative. So
yes,
I think this will be no different. We'll find a lot of innovation coming out of this, how we communicate, how we move the needle, how we change processes, and how we make systemic change viable.
Excellent. And so Michael, you put up the website, which is great, and you say that it's functional now, so folks can go there. We'll certainly share this information widely, and I know all of us will. If I can be of any help down the road, glad. I mean, perhaps when we make the selection in February, March, whatever, when the dust settles, we'll have to kind of talk about with the new people, whatever we can do to help to let people know that this is a sustained approach, and we will not be an anomaly where we're innovative here in New Haven, in terms of pizza, and Bridgeport in terms of PT Barnum, I guess. But we will make it happen, and just so glad you gentlemen had time on this Sunday afternoon. Any kind of closing words before we kind of sign off?
Well, number one, I want to really, really thank you not only for this opportunity to be on your show, but also on such short notice that you made this happen so quickly. Very, very grateful for that. I'm very, very grateful for this opportunity also because I don't know if anybody with these kinds of funds has actually tried to communicate with the African American community in this way. In other words, going directly to venues where there's a large African American constituency listening or reading or or watching, so to speak. And so this is the first of a number of outlets that we're going to be going to, and it's very important that we leverage that.
Yes.
I really, really appreciate it. And I appreciate Earl, who, working with you made this, it seemed like, one second I was talking to Earl about this idea with the other members of the committee. And the next thing you know, I'm on the Tom Ficklin show. And I thank you both from the bottom of my heart for making this happen so fast.
It's our pleasure. It's
absolutely.
It takes a village. Takes a village.
Absolutely.
Gentlemen, have a great day. We'll be in touch. This is really just much kind of a affirmation about what you're doing, and keep the faith. And I didn't talk too much about Michael, about even whoever's chosen, because this is a national initiative. It seems to me that there's going to be incremental, if not major, benefit to being involved with this organization, not just because the connections just nationwide.
As my dad used to say, if the good Lord is willing and the creek don't rise,
amen.
There's no telling what we'll do.
Amen. Amen. Gentlemen, take real care.
All right.
It's
been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.